For the first time ever in literally human history, life expectancy is on the decline. And for the first time ever, we are eating ourselves to death instead of starving to death. That's always been the problem historically with humans, is that like a scarcity. And now we are in excess and we are in consumerism and we are eating too much. And there was a really cool study from the Lancet journal that literally proved that food is the #1 killer on earth. Like that.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the New Age Sage podcast. I'm here with my guest, Alex Conley, who is the founder of Kono Nutrition and a health advocate. And the reason I'm bringing him on especially is that I am a stickler for part ingredients. I haven't taken a powder or any health powder for years, period, just because of how nefarious, misleading, and dangerous the ingredients are. And yours, when I looked at it, when Danny sent it to through Danny sent it to me, I looked at the ingredients. I was like, whoa, it's the first powder I've seen that's fucking straight clean. So, that means that out of everyone, you know what the hell's going on, which is interesting. And, in this podcast, we talk a lot about relationships between lovers, friends. And what I wanted to begin with was kind of how much we forget the impact of health in our demeanor and ability to relate to people. Like, how many people who are angry at their partners all the time are just unhealthy? How many people who are just frustrated and can't communicate are just unhealthy? So let's begin with like what woke you up to the importance of health, but your story, and it can move more towards like what felt impact that had with you and your personal relationships and the way you felt as a person. That was night and day for me.
Yeah, man, that's so important. My story starts really young. So when I was 4 years old, I was diagnosed with leukemia. And basically when you have leukemia, you have no white blood cells. And so the worst thing that could possibly happen is that you get sick. Because when you have no white blood cells, you have no immune system. And so what happened to me was I did almost 4 years of chemotherapy. But throughout that time, I got the chicken pox at some point. And I spent like 4 months in the hospital. And so I was really sheltered after that experience, But I also had this huge awakening really early on of how important my health was, because it was like all eyes on me in my family. My parents were super concerned about my health all the time. And so I was like so young, and that's like, I've been fighting for my health since the first thing I can remember. That was probably like my earliest memory in life was fighting for my health, but also fear of death, which I've had to work through a lot of that. And then essentially, I think that just like carried with me throughout my life. But it wasn't really until after college where I had kind of a second awakening when it came to my health, because I kind of went on to play 3 sports in high school and was a pretty normal kid. But then when I went to college, I was in a fraternity. So I drank like crazy.
Same here, yeah.
Were you really? Yeah. Which one, by the way?
I was in I went to a kind of a strange school, and it was like an international co-ed fraternity. So the guys and girls in the same one.
Wow, I've never even heard of that, actually. Yeah.
It was cool. Anyway,
yeah. But I joined a fraternity and partied all the time, ate shitty food. And my whole life, I wanted to become a pediatric oncologist. So I went to school to study medicine.
I'm assuming that was also because you wanted to save kids from the situation you were in.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I always doctors were my heroes growing up, right? Because I was around them all the time too. And I was always like, wow, these people are like saving me. That's kind of what I was viewing it as. So that's always what I thought I wanted to do. And I ended up not being very good at school. It just was never my strength. And what I ended up choosing instead was exercise physiology. And I still loved and was really fascinated about the body and how it worked. And so I chose that path, which really wasn't that much easier than med school anyways. And I ended up going down a rabbit hole of just fitness. I was like working out every day, counting calories, counting macros. And I worked at GNC, the supplement store. And so like fitness became my whole life. And what happened when I was focusing on just fitness is I actually lost my health. Because what people tell you in like the fitness space and working out is just like exercise, work really hard. It's a simple math equation between calories in, calories out. All you got to do is bust your ass and not eat a lot of food. But when you bust your ass and don't eat very much, you can really disrupt your hormones. And that's what happened to me. And so I got diagnosed with chronic fatigue, IBS. I wrecked my gut in the process. And I'm like, what the hell? I think I'm doing all the right things. How am I unhealthy? And so that's really where I had like a big awakening on what it means to be actually healthy. And that led me down a path of like more root cause medicine. My boss at GNC was an herbalist. So she was kind of like
Just tapped in.
yeah, it was awesome. And so I started learning about all of that and like using food as medicine to heal you. And I'm sitting there going, why have I never learned this in any of my schooling that I'm like paying for? And there's so much ancient wisdom out there. So then because she was so tapped in, like I explored that world like crazy. And that was really like where the moment came for me of like, holy shit, my health is the most important thing in my life. And I never want to lose it. And I was seeing so many different doctors in Western medicine just giving me diagnosis of like, you know, chronic fatigue and IBS is not a diagnosis. Like those are symptoms. And so then I had to really figure out how to heal myself. And I did that throughout a long process.
But what's so sad about this story, and I empathize with you, and I share the experience, is that I assume that you were doing this fitness, GNC supplement stuff because you were interested and invested in becoming the healthiest version of yourself.
Yeah.
And what's sad about that is so many people I see fall into that trap of like, I want to become healthy. I want to start this path of being the best version of myself. And they go towards what the mainstream agenda pushes them towards, which is calories, macros, supplements. And that breaks my heart because actually there's this God-given like fuel in them to enhance and impact their life force because that's the moral good path there is. But then what we're pushed towards is a complete inversion of that. So let's dive into that because it honestly breaks my heart because like it'd be different if you were just like didn't give a fuck and you were just drinking all the time and you wanted to get ripped and you're doing macros. But if you genuinely want to be healthy and doing that, that's sad. So let's start there and then I'll try and come in with my own perspective. I don't know much about this beyond my own experience, but so let's begin with if you could label the most nefarious, damaging components of mainstream health. Let's tackle these one by one. And for viewers' context, I've also been down this road. I don't know as much as you, but I've experimented with everything.
Yeah.
I'm super clean and locked in what I believe to be health, and that's impacted my life tremendously, just for context here. So let's tackle some of these killers.
Bro, it's such a good question. And I guess I'll start off by saying, like, we have just totally destroyed our medical system. And to the point where the stats right now are really sad. I'm not sure if you know many of them, but now it's 42% of Americans will get cancer in their lifetime, which is crazy. And,
That's insane.
Yeah, the American diet is now almost 70% processed foods. It's a little over 60% that we're consuming as processed foods. And for children, it's even more. It's above 70%. I think it's like 74%. Because, I mean, kids are being directly marketed to, right? Like, what do we view? Like, if you think about what a kid's menu is, it's just the most trash food you could possibly feed any human. And we call it a kid's menu.
And their brain develops craving, desiring that because that's what they're given as a kid, and their brain like develops that way.
It's crazy. Yeah. And so the stats are really sad of what's happening. And it's like we've run a really profitable business, a very successful business in our healthcare system. It's the number one GDP in America. And so now we rely on it. Like we literally rely on people being sick. And the way that I love to explain it is the way that it's explained in traditional Chinese medicine, which is that in Western medicine, doctors are basically viewed as the mechanic. So now when doctors go to medical school, they have over 100 different subspecialties to choose from. So we're subdividing the body into 100 different parts instead of just saying it's the human body. And so why I say like the mechanic is because of what does a mechanic do? Like when you have a breakdown somewhere on your car, they just go replace one part. And so that's why we have like urologists, neurologists, surgeons of all different kinds, like nose surgeons, ear surgeons. It's like so specific. And so we're only viewing the body as mechanical parts, but not actually an ecosystem. Versus in traditional Chinese medicine, what they do is they say the body is a garden and the doctor is the gardener. And so they focus, on the soil and on all the different plants and all the different species in the garden to affect each other. And they know that they influence each other. And so I really think that's the biggest thing that we've done wrong is it got into our education systems. And I believe it was back in like 1918. It was all goes back to the Rockefeller family. And what they did is they decided to fund pretty much every university med school. And they basically said, we have a new system. And it was called the Fluxner Report. And they said, if you're not involved in this intervention first model, because that was around the time where we developed some certain pharmaceuticals that were like really honestly life-changing, like antibiotics, penicillin, all that stuff. was great. Like we saved a lot of lives from that. But then they developed what they called intervention first model. And it's like, that's the first line of defense. And if you're not on this intervention model, you're getting left behind and we're not funding your school. And so pretty much every med school in America had to adopt this concept of the intervention first model. And like I said, I think that was 1918, and we're still using that intervention first
I
model.
also heard that before then there was also more of an emphasis on homeopathy
Oh, 100%.
in the system.
Yeah.
I think that's like the perception people come back with, is that like, well, before the Rockefellers took over, everyone was dying of infections and shit. And it's like, sure, like that's a valid data point, but you're also forgetting that like that's not everything. Like,
Yeah.
for example, I'll literally only go to a doctor or the hospital if I have a severe infection or if I have a broken bone. That's it. Like literally, like completely, I wouldn't go for anything else. And like you can't base that evidence on everything. You can't say, oh, just because they have antibiotics and penicillin, that means they know everything. Right? That's like the common thing. I'm just like, oh, that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, it's not true health.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like doctors aren't taught anything about health. They're taught maybe 2 weeks of nutrition total in their 8 to 12 years of schooling, like less than 2 weeks. It's truly insane. And so what they're taught is, again, like, pharmacology and how to heal a symptom. And there's a saying that says, my symptoms are my saviors. And that's true in everything, like in not only physical health, but spiritual health, right? Like when there's discomfort in the body, we view that as a symptom. And what the Western medical system does is we mask symptoms. So we say, like, we don't want anyone to sit in that discomfort, when in reality, that's the exact thing that we need to do. And that's exactly what's going to save us. So the way I always like to describe this is, I mean, have you probably heard that like inflammation is the root of all disease? Mm-hmm. It's not, because what happens is if you roll your ankle, you get inflammation in your ankle. Inflammation is your body's response to try to heal itself. Like our body is this self-healing machine. And so when you roll your ankle, it sends all these good signals, cells, and fluids to that area that causes the inflammation, but it's actually sending like a bunch of stem cells, and that's why it gets inflamed, and it's carried in that fluid. And so that's why you see the inflammation, but it's the exact response that your body is trying to like heal itself. And so the same thing happens when you're feeding yourself processed foods and inflammatory foods. Your gut is getting inflammation. And so that's why people love to say like inflammation is the root of all disease, but it's not. It's like the food that you're eating. Yeah. And so inflammation is just your body's response trying to heal itself or trying to tell you something. Yeah. And then what we've been taught to do is just like take some Tums or like, mask the symptoms. So
let's dive into the mechanics a bit so people understand, maybe scientifically in your perspective, why is food the gateway to all health? Like why to me, in my experience, why is that the most important thing? Like why is it that food impacts everything? How does that work?
Yeah, a couple things. The first thing that comes to mind for me is that, I mean, food directly feeds your mitochondria, which then converts to ATP and converts to energy in your body. And when you eat, there's a really unique study that they basically did on grilled cheese sandwiches, and they used white bread and Kraft, like American single sliced cheese, which is hilarious. They actually can't even call it cheese on the label. It says a cheese-like product, I think.
Yeah. Isn't it vegan as well?
It might be. I don't know. It's just like plastic.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then they were like, let's do a whole food grilled cheese sandwich. And they used just whole wheat bread and real cheese, at least. And what happened is it took the body 50% more energy to process the processed food, the white bread and the Kraft cheese versus, the whole wheat bread and the real chease. And
what does that mean?
So your body basically has to work a lot harder to break that down. And so that's how people's metabolism gets ruined, essentially, because your body has to use so much more energy to convert that food into fuel through the mitochondria and ATP process.
So that could possibly also explain why people, for example, when they eat lunch,
tired.
They feel like they're dying after. That was me for years.
Was it?
Yeah, I felt I was dying. I'd eat lunch and literally be like, I'm dying.
Like you have to sleep or what? Or like
my brain would just stop working.
Yeah.
I'd just be like, look, I couldn't think. Just my brain was, I couldn't add 2 + 2. My brain was just dead.
Yeah, man. And that's exactly why, because your body has to use all of its energy to digest that food. So like you have no blood flow in your brain essentially because it's all in your gut trying to digest that
I
food.
didn't know that. That's fascinating. Wow.
And then the other thing that came to mind is food directly impacts your mood more than anything. It's like the most important thing. And so
how does that work?
90% of your serotonin is made in the gut. And 50% of your dopamine is made in the gut lining. And serotonin, for people that don't know, is responsible for your mood and your happiness. And it's funny, like we call it a neurotransmitter, and neuro means brain, but it's really, it's produced and made in the gut. And what happens, and then dopamine, I guess, is, drive and motivation for people that don't know that. And what happens, and this is the importance of like eating organic food, because what happens when you consume pesticides that are sprayed on food, like side literally means to kill. And so what happens is it breaks down the gut lining tight junctions because it's killing off bacteria. I mean, that's what like pesticide means, to kill pests. And your body is made of, your gut is made of trillions of bacteria.
So the pesticides they spray on the fruit and vegetables kills the bacteria in your gut.
Right. And
good and bad.
Exactly. And then limits your ability to produce serotonin and dopamine because it's made in the gut. And so like, how can you possibly
just nuking the serotonin and the dopamine in your gut?
Right. And so like, how can you possibly feel happy or regulate your mood? And how can you possibly feel like you have drive and motivation when you're consuming these foods that are directly impacting your production of your serotonin and dopamine?
Yeah. I often just sometimes I'll sit in an airport sometimes. I look at, most Americans, they're only eating processed food. They're only eating foods that they probably can't even digest properly, that fucks their energy up. But they seem like they're fine. Like they have this image of like they're living their lives fine. I don't know if you think about this, like, how the hell are you fucking alive? Like when I was eating that way, I literally felt like I was dying. I was miserable, depressed, and for me, it's like, are they just deeply unaware of how they feel? Like, what's your perspective on that? Like people, because again, most Americans only eat processed food sprayed in pesticides, and they literally eat stuff that's destroying their health. What's going on there? How can they? Because people who want to stay in that comfort zone of eating this food will look at people like, oh, that guy eats it all the time, he's fine, right? Like, what's going on there? Like, what's actually going on with those people?
I think that there's definitely
NPCs. Like, what's happening?
I mean, there's definitely some sort of massive disconnect happening for sure. And I think the other thing is like the human body is so resilient, man. Like we are the most beastly survival species on the planet, right? And I think what most people don't realize though is how shitty they feel because they don't know how good they can actually feel.
Their baseline is fucked.
Yeah. They have zero concept and they have no baseline. And I think the reason why you probably also recognized how shitty you felt is because you had maybe felt good at one point, right? Like you had the high and the low kind of thing. And so most people have never even experienced what it feels like to even feel good. And what I would encourage everyone to do is even like 10 days. There was a really unique study that just came out that said if you ate all organic whole foods for 10 days, basically most of your symptoms dissipate. Like most of your autoimmune condition symptoms start to disappear, and most of the inflammation in your body starts to disappear. And then you start getting a taste of what it feels like to even feel good again. Yeah. And then it's like, then you go eat fast food and you go, holy shit, like it feels like a brick in my gut. I'm not even digesting this. Yeah. And then you're like, was I feeling like this the whole time? And you're just like so unaware because your body basically tries to always stay in energy balance and homeostasis, and everything that you put into your body, like into your gut, is also talking and communicating with your brain. And so there's that direct like gut brain connection and pathway.
Interesting theory for you. I think it validates what you're saying. I recently seeing this new health person. I just want to like really, I have a couple issues that I've done everything that haven't gone away in my life, and I'm finally kicking them out. And she basically believes that I used to be a drug addict, and I still have certain addictive tendencies I'm working through still. They're transferred to more healthy stuff now, which is better, but still not great. So she believes that my addiction which to me was stimulants, and then consequently downers to like not go insane when they would inevitably crash. She believes that I was addicted to those things because I couldn't. My gut was so fucked up that I couldn't produce dopamine. I couldn't produce these neurochemicals. So I was at an Ivy League college. I was like, I have to do well in school. I couldn't think, because my gut was so fucked up. I had brain fog that was so bad that when I found stimulants, I was like, whoa, I can actually fucking think straight. And for me, such a revolutionary, fascinating theory that we don't talk about enough. Is like how much of addiction, definitely part of it is trauma, that's for sure. But how much of it is actually just that so many people are struggling with addiction, and I don't think it can be just pawned off trauma or poor neurology. I think a lot of it is honestly that, like we're talking about, like they just can't produce beneficial hormones because their gut doesn't work. So maybe go into that a bit. Like, do you agree with what you're saying? Do you think there's a possibility of that a lot of people who are like addicted to caffeine or stimulants or alcohol are just that because they can't produce these things naturally, and that's the only way they can have some way to be a normal person?
Dude, I think again, like this goes back to just how disconnected we are, and especially our medical system and what happened to it. So dating back to literally the father of medicine, Hippocrates, his classic famous saying was all disease begins in the gut. And he had a view that like we are psychosomatic entities, and he's the father of medicine. And we've completely disregarded everything he says now as like woo-woo and it's not real. But yet, as doctors, they still take the Hippocratic Oath, which is, they have to swear in at ceremony as soon as they get their white coat ceremony, raise their hand and take the Hippocratic Oath, which says first do no harm and all of that stuff, and
breaking it every day,
going off of of the Hippocrates teachings. But yet we ignore all of his other teachings about how all disease starts in the gut. And I think that he literally meant all disease, including addiction, including all of this stuff. Like, I think it's so powerful. And like, why do you think we get that gut feeling when Danny was talking about this at the event over the weekend, where he was like, for anyone that's ever been cheated on, raise your hand if you had a gut feeling that you were getting cheated on. And everyone threw their hand up. It's like, literally you have this like a superpower in your gut. And that's why they call the gut the second brain, is because like, that's why you get those gut feelings. Like, that's where all the intuitiveness comes from. And so how can you possibly be tapped in, to that feeling when your gut's inflamed?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I want to kind of move towards now some more specific things in health. That one thing I think that I'm fascinated by is the whole caloric model, because like, I'll be honest with my listeners and my own experience where I fucked up. So I was like, holy shit, calories are a scam. Like, whatever, I can just eat healthy foods all the time. But then I got fat because I just ate a ton of food, like just was like drowning in calories.
What were you eating though?
Healthy stuff. I was eating like ground beef, all natural food. I was eating a fuck ton of it, like way too much of it. So I do believe the calorie model is wrong in the sense of like, if you just focus on calories as health, and okay, I'll eat a Kit Kat if it fits into my macros, right? It's 200 calories, I can add it in. Or, all this protein powder, all these fillers and gums has protein, I can have it. That model I think's fucked up, but what's really wrong about the macro stuff? And is there any truth to calories? What's the truth there? What's not true? What part of it can we use to maintain? Because for me, like, I don't know, I feel like I experienced the other side of it where I just ate way too much food.
Yeah.
I also have like an insane appetite. Like, it's my own addiction stuff, so I was just eating too much food. But what's like the truth about calories? Like, is there any truth to it? What's true? What's not true?
Yeah, absolutely. Calories are definitely true, but it's only a piece of the puzzle. And where I think that it's so misleading to people, and why I almost like, I still like have harsh feelings towards people in the fitness space and fitness influencers that are only talking about calories.
Oh, same here.
Because it's like they're only viewing as like weight loss in this math equation equating to health. And that's not how it works. So like, there was a really fascinating study that this dude was like, I'll prove to you that all that matters are calories. And he only ate Twinkies, but in a caloric deficit and lost weight. Yeah. And it's like, just because you lose weight,
everyone uses that one. Everyone says that. Everyone uses that same thing. It's like, this is why I'm right and you're wrong.
I know. All right. But it's like, okay, does that mean that just because you lost weight eating Twinkies, you actually got healthier? No. And so that's
on one level. On like one metric.
Right,
of
exactly.
Like fat loss, but like not on like 80 other metrics.
Exactly. It's only like the smallest piece of the puzzle, truly. Like, that's what really like bugs me. And the other thing is, like, I always tell people, like, you've been taught to count calories. Like, your body should be able to kind of naturally count calories, because when you're eating real whole foods, what it should do is trigger your satiety signals, which is basically saying I'm full and I am nourished. But the reason why we constantly overeat is because food companies literally pay food scientists. That's probably the top paid person in their company out front of like the major executives is the food scientists, because they create products that have these compounds in them in the perfect ratio of fat, sugars, and carbs and flavors that then keep you coming back, and they trigger your dopamine signals instead of triggering your satiety signals. So then you get addicted and you start craving things based on the flavor of foods. And that's how our bodies are designed to actually eat intuitively, is based on the flavor of foods, because flavors are indicative of nutrients. And so you've probably had a store-bought tomato that tastes like water, like it tastes like nothing, because there's no nutrients in it. But have you ever had a homegrown tomato that's like
At some point in my life, probably.
so sweet, and you bite into it and it's like juicy? You've probably even just like bought something at the store, of fruit that you're like, this has no flavor to it.
Yeah.
It's because it's so
And you
like,
reject
nutrient.
it. You
Yeah,
reject it. You literally like, I don't want to eat this shit.
yeah, it's so nutrient depleted. But when you have like this like ripe, perfectly, homegrown fruit or vegetable, it's full of flavors, because flavors equals nutrients. And so even like when people came over on what was like the Mayweather or something to America and everyone got scurvy, remember reading about that in school? Like they all craved citrus fruits. And it's because like we are supposed to intuitively crave foods based on flavors. And like these foods companies and these food scientists knew that. And that's why everything you see in the grocery store, like I think it's a stat now that 99% of food items have, quote unquote, natural flavoring, because they know that you can kind of hijack that signal in the brain. And the process is called the post-ingestive feedback loop. And it's basically like everything that you're putting into your body should trigger your satiety signals based on, these flavors. And when you're eating a flavorful food that doesn't actually contain the nutrients associated with that flavor, that post-ingestive feedback loop gets super confused and doesn't know to trigger your satiety signals. And that's what like keeps you coming back and having these food addictions and food cravings. And so like the best way to do it is obviously just to eat real whole foods that don't have
I
added
also assume
flavors.
part of that is that if it didn't have the flavoring, you wouldn't want to return to eat it.
Yeah, like if you just had like a Coca-Cola, for example, it was like what, 50 grams of sugar or something, and everyone's like, oh, the sugar is what's addicting in a Coca-Cola. But if I just put 50 grams of sugar in the water,
Yeah.
you'd be like, yeah, that's fucking gross. I don't want to keep drinking that. So it's the flavor that triggers your brain that makes you keep coming back.
So if you're someone who wants to lose weight, what's the best way to do it while holding onto your health, not falling into the macros trap?
Yeah. I think it's honestly like exactly what you have done. Like, I think you crushed it, dude. Like you're a prime example of doing that, where like you found what worked best for you. You experimented, you tried a lot of different things. You only eat real whole foods. You became super disciplined. And when you're eating real whole foods, your body should, trigger your satiety signals much better, at least than eating processed foods. Like obviously you still can overeat, but it's kind of hard to like, if you just ate steak and fruit and vegetables, like it's pretty damn hard to overeat that stuff. And maybe you had a little bit of a different experience. But it's almost like your body will tell you when you're full, because you don't want to keep going. Like it'd be so hard to eat 2 pounds of steak, like it's just for most people, maybe like you said, you have a big appetite, but I think that's like the biggest.
It's easy to eat like a bunch of bread.
100%. Yeah.
And then the sauces are just like full of
the flavors and
shit.
fats, sugars, all that stuff. Yeah. So again, I think it's like there's a holistic part to it where like, yes, the calories matter and you should be mindful of that. And if you need to track it for a little bit just to like have an idea, I think that's perfectly okay. Like it's a tool, but we should use it as a tool and not like a Bible, like a
So if you're
religion.
going to use macros, make sure you're not using that to justify your, like what I see fitness people do. And maybe I'm throwing shots here, but it's like they're finding a way to like control and justify their addiction to shitty food. So it's like, if I do macros, I can have a Kit Kat and ice cream, and these like those like Ninja Creamy protein ice creams full of junk. It's like I can eat that, right? Because it's my macros. It's like their way of justifying their addiction to shitty food. But because they're losing weight and they're fit, they're like, oh, it's fine.
Dude, it's the ultimate marketing scam in the fitness space, and like that's 100% why I started Kono, is because I saw that over and over again, and I was like, someone's got to do something about this, and someone's got to talk about it and speak to it, because the fitness industry became like big food.
Yeah.
It's crazy, you know, because all they talked about was exactly what you just said. Like if it fits within your macros, and like every product was associated with like, you know, cookies and cream, ice cream. Like it was
Yeah.
almost like they're marketing
Yeah, healthy.
this like,
Like it's like
yeah,
healthy. This
you're
is
right.
healthy, right?
Yeah.
Like
Like they're
high
marketing.
protein, lower calories, full of fucking shit. That's healthy.
It's
Completely
insane.
irrational.
Yeah.
My argument, because my sister, I love her deeply. You know, she's starting to wake up on this stuff. But like, well, I'll tell her because she's been like addicted to macros. Like just like it's her way of controlling her body. Like I
Hmm.
know I can stay the same weight, and for women, I get there's a the own trauma there and stuff. Like I understand it, but I do tell her the argument I have to these people is that like what they can't really rebuttal is like you can have the same exact macros, the same exact calories you want, just don't put shit in there. Like what in the, how do you return say what do you say to that? Like that there's you can eat the same exact foods, plug in the macros, but why can't you make them healthy?
Exactly. Well, I think that people, again, don't even realize how much better they could be feeling. And they're only focusing on one part of their health, which is their weight management. And that's what calories and macros are for. But they have no idea how much food can actually be medicine and influence your mood and influence your dopamine and influence your serotonin. Like they're not viewing us as like this garden and this
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem and this holistic being that the food that we eat controls our mood and our drive. And if they just like took a minute to realize that and experience that and actually felt it. I mean, it's the same thing with like, you know, you could sit there and talk about like having a spiritual experience all day, and people would maybe like acknowledge in their minds that like that's really cool, but you never actually connect the dot and feel it until you
Mm-hmm.
feel it for yourself, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you experience it for yourself. So I think it's just like the same thing. It's all connected.
Is there any daily you found that like you can eat the same calories, but certain like food groups would lead to a fitter body or fitter health? You know what I'm asking here? Like, is there a ratio of certain like fats or carbs or protein that makes one healthier within the
Hmm.
own macro structure?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I'm a believer in protein. Like, I'm definitely a believer in eating high protein.
How much?
I think that based on the data that I've seen, it's anywhere, and this goes for men and women, is between zero point 0.6 to 1 gram per pound of body weight is kind of the sweet spot.
I do 1 gram.
Do you? Perfect. Yeah, I do the same. Like, that's what I try and do. The issue that people have with protein of like you can overeat it and you can undereat it, and that seems to be the sweet spot, is because when it comes to longevity, you have this process in the body that's called mTOR. And when you eat too much protein, you're in a state of just like constantly stimulating mTOR in the body. And mTOR is great because it repairs tissues, and like that's why eating protein is good. But when you overconsume mTOR, and specifically what stimulates mTOR is an amino acid called leucine, and that's what like muscle meats are made out of. And when you're in a chronic state of like stimulating mTOR, it can actually lead to faster aging. And so that's why like our ancestors are geniuses, and we just need to look back to them for everything. They utilize the whole parts of the animal because what it does is it balances the amino acid ratio between leucine and glycine.
Hmm.
So when they would eat bone broths and collagen and things like that, those tissues and those protein sources are really high in glycine, and it balances off that leucine and doesn't chronically stimulate mTOR. And so then it actually is anti-aging instead of aging.
What about the perspective that fat makes you fat? Eating fat makes you fat.
It's the type of fat, absolutely. I mean, we know that for sure. And it's even so interesting that now we have like I mean, how old are you?
26.
Okay, yeah, I'm 30, so we grew up like in a similar time where, you know, I ate margarine. Like I grew up on margarine instead of butter,
Yeah.
like the fake butter stuff. And what happens is now we have so much data around like saturated fat is essential for hormones, and same thing as cholesterol. Like we need good cholesterol, good saturated fat from good sources like grass-fed butter, coconut oil, beef tallow, things like that are essential for cholesterol, which then is essential for testosterone and our
Hmm.
hormones. And so, yeah, I think that it's just 100% the type of fat. Like I'm so big. That's why I'm such a proponent of on like I'm not as worried about the macros and stuff. Like obviously that stuff is important, but the sourcing is what is absolutely most important, because that's what, you know, your body actually counts. Like that's what matters the most in your body, of whether the food is either healing you or it's killing you.
What's the health difference between two people? One person's fat source is butter, tallow, egg yolks, avocado. One's main fat source is seed oils. They're using that as a fat source mostly. What's the difference between those two people?
Yes, there's a really unique thing in the body that's the omega-3 to 6 ratio. And so all of those first foods that you just listed are actually pretty good sources of omega-3s. And seed oils, for example, are really high in omega-6 fatty acids. And it's a good marker that we use as a blood test in medicine of inflammation is we check the omega-3 to 6 ratio. And so you want to have really high omega-3s and, pretty low levels of omega-6s. And so when you're in reverse of that and you're eating a lot of omega-6s from seed oils and not a lot of omega-3s, that ratio becomes imbalanced. And then it's a sign that you have more inflammation in your body. And that's why, again, the sourcing is so key, because even when you eat grass-fed cattle versus grain-fed cattle, it becomes a completely different food because of that omega-3 to 6 ratio. The grass-fed beef is really high in omega-3s. Grain-fed beef is really high in omega-6s. And then even beyond that, cows are designed to eat grass. We all knew that, you know what I mean? And so it's basically you took an animal and you made it basically eat processed foods. And so then that animal became fat and sick. And then what happens when...
How severe is it though? For example, I'm going on, when I go on vacation, it's hard to find places that serve grass-fed meat. How bad is it if you have a grass-fed, grain-fed meat? Is it really, really bad?
No, I think every once in a while it's totally fine, dude. I do the same thing. And this is what I always tell people, because I think it's so hard to not be identified as a fear monger in the space, because I want to talk about this stuff because I think it's deeply, deeply important.
Yeah.
But I also encourage people to just do the best you can with the information that you have. And, if you're not perfect 100% of the time, that's totally fine. And by stressing about being perfect 100% of the time, you're causing dis-ease in your body by doing that as well.
Yeah. There's certain things I won't eat, period. But
for sure.
But yeah.
No, doing that every once in a while is not going to throw your omega-3 to 6 ratio out of whack forever.
But you think combine that with fries cooked in, canola oil, then that might.
Then you'll feel the inflammation. I guarantee you would. You know what I mean?
If I can't do it. Whenever I notice people think I'm crazy. They sneak it in food. I'll notice it.
Yeah.
I'll catch it. I'll feel more bloated. But
because you know what it likes. You know what it's like to feel really good.
Yeah. And on that point, what do you say about for example, because there is actual. I'm team anti-seed oils. I'm fully with it. But what confuses me is that there is a ton of data that shows it's not bad for you. And how do you make sense of that? These people in the fitness industry who are there's no evidence data-wise that seed oils are bad for you. I'm dude, literally, try a month of eating tallow versus seed oils and just tell me how you feel.
Yeah.
How do you make sense of that? How do you make sense of 'cause anyone now can find data online on PubMed that supports their own dietary illusions on any side. So it's how do you manage that? And specifically in the construct of the seed oil department.
I think that we're measuring the wrong things. The only thing that we've ever measured in seed oils is, do seed oils lower cholesterol? Yes, they do. But does lowering cholesterol directly correlate with not causing heart disease? No, it does not. So it's we're measuring the wrong thing. It's basically just the same thing as saying, does eating in a calorie deficit make you lose weight? Yes. But is that directly making you healthier? Maybe it's only a piece of the puzzle. You know what I mean? So it's I view it as the same thing as seed oils. And the reason, again, I'm so keen on sourcing, the reason I avoid seed oils is because in order to make canola oil, you take the flour, you thousands of pounds of it, and then it turns into a sludge. And then from that sludge, you deodorize it using a bunch of solvents, and then you bleach it because it smells like shit. And so then you have to bleach it to get rid of, all the gunk looking things, and deodorize it. And then, turn it into this oil that you eat. And it's just it's not a natural process at all. That's not food. You know what I mean? Olive oil, you literally press olives and it turns into oil. We have so many different better options out there. And so for me, nature has all the answers. And that's how I've always viewed food, is we can look to nature. If it's grown by God, intended to be consumed by us, then I'm going to eat it. But seed oils, you can argue all day. And basically what I tell people is that you've been convinced that science knows more about your body than you know about your body. Because you can sit there and argue the science all day on both sides. And in my opinion, I think that the reason why the science is so flawed on both sides is like, seek and you shall find. Humans are so powerful, whatever we're looking for, like science is not more powerful than the human mind. Like we can influence it directly. You know what I mean?
There's like a serious, I believe to be some borderline satanic belief that our intellectual creations can surpass what God intended for us in any department, right? Especially food is like, we can do this better than God, right? For example, the cow example, like we can give these things grain feed, we can mass jab them with 80 vaccines, and like that's better. That's somehow better than a fucking cow naturally living on grass, or just so many examples of that. Like, well, what do you think about that concept? That when men use their intellect to believe they can do better than divinity,
dude,
we're in some shit.
I think about this all the time because I think that that's exactly where we've gone wrong. And like, I think you just described it perfectly. I have the same exact feelings that like the more disconnected we get from nature, the sicker that we get. And just to give you examples, like we've been practicing traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and all those ancient practices for somewhere between like 2,500 and 5,000 years now. And we've only been practicing Western medicine for about 150 years. Like it's not that long. What's happened to our health in the last 150 years? Disease rates have skyrocketed. And people will use the argument that like we're living longer than ever. But it's like we have technology.
Zombies, we're living like zombies.
Yeah, exactly.
Forever.
We have technology to keep people alive.
Yeah.
But like the disease rates are absolutely insane. And most of the world, actually, 80% of the world's population still uses herbal medicine as the first line of defense. And it's because like it's what it should be, like that is the first line of defense. And we should be able to find this balance, like you said earlier, of like, yes, let's actually like create health by using these herbal remedies and by using food as medicine. And if we actually need Western medicine, then we can go use it for the great resource that it is in those acute situations. But like we have more chronic illness than ever. And chronic illness is a foreign concept to most other cultures.
So what data points are there that kind of try and reverse engineer their argument, just try and kind of debate it? I'm on your side. I'm trying to make more nuanced conversation. So if you were to ask someone who's a full proponent of the Western medical system, why their system has been revolutionary better in compared to the more ancient ways of healing, what would they say?
They'll probably say that antibiotics, if you didn't have an antibiotic, you would die from strep throat, or...
Is that true?
It can be, for sure. It can be, for sure. Actually, my aunt, I never knew her, but she was, I think, 4 or 5 years old. And, it was a long time ago. And
I say that because I have this, like, I think a part of men that I deal with is like, I'm so cocky in my own health. I'm like, fucking antibiotics, no chance. I'll bug it out. Because when I was a kid, I constantly had skin infections from eczema. So I was always on antibiotics, and I'm still dealing with like the candida and yeast overgrowth from that experience. Bro. Like really bad. It's not fun. So my brain goes like antibiotics, like fuck out of here. So I was just curious what you thought about that. So, okay, so in certain emergencies, they're useful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like especially like in war, like that's where a lot of people were dying, is like infections. So, but again, it's more like, they were treating it for like acute situations is where penicillin really came in and saved people's lives. So that's like more the argument was like, yeah, a gunshot wound would get infected and we didn't have antibiotics, or a, injury or something like that would get infected and their leg would, fall off and then you would die. Right. But yeah, what actually did happen to my aunt is she got strep throat and then it turned into scarlet fever and she passed away when she was a little girl. I never knew her. My dad never did either.
Wow.
So like it's possible for that to happen in super rare scenarios, but I'm like very similar to you where now I use oil of oregano whenever I want an antibiotic. So I had strep throat earlier this year and I gargled with oil of oregano and I took oil of oregano capsules and I cleared up, like all the white spots went away within 24 hours. So I mean, there's like really powerful natural antibiotics that we can use as well and that are a little bit more selective and don't completely destroy every good bacteria in our body. So they're also a little more gentle.
Just for evidence, I used to get sick all the time. In college, I would literally get strep throat all the fucking time. I'd be having colds all the time. And now I honestly haven't been sick in like about 2 years. Legit, that for real, I have not been sick in 2 years. And the only thing that's changed is I stopped drinking alcohol. I stopped doing drugs. I only eat clean food. I do my best to manage my stress levels. That's the most important. Is that when I feel myself kind of getting sick, I'll immediately just be chill the fuck out because I know that our body invites in disease when it needs to like rest and be still. But I don't get sick at all. So that theory to me means that like most people getting sick all the time, they probably just have a fucked up gut, and that leads to a faulty immune system. Yeah, they're always stressed out. So I mean, you can. My evidence of people who say I'm a quack is that like, dude, I haven't been sick in 2 years. Like I haven't been sick in 2 years. Like how do you explain that? Is it just like luck? Like what? No, this shit's real.
Exactly, it is. And even I think it's Joe Dispenza uses this example of like how disease starts in the body, and he'll use the example of like, let's say you get pulled over in traffic and you initiate this huge stress response, right? Like you get nervous, your body goes through this like big endorphin rush. And so your physiology is literally changing before your very own eyes. And the cop comes up to your window and you're shaking and stuff like that. And then 10 minutes later you leave and maybe you don't get a ticket or whatever. And then your body goes back to normal. But just from that 10 minutes of like that super heightened response, you changed every cell in your body into like sheer panic. And like you said, then what's happening is like you're more susceptible to, you know, catching a cold or whatever, because like your physiology just changed down to the cellular level. And then we have the opposite science that says, you know, just 15 minutes of a gratitude practice and being in a state of gratitude literally boosts your natural killer cells by like 50%. And even like in Japan, for example, they tell people to just, it's called forest bathing. And so Japanese doctors actually give this as a prescription to people that are very stressed or experiencing anxiety. And they just say, go out in nature around trees and just walk 3 to 4 days a week for about 20 minutes and just like a nature walk. But they coined the term forest bathing. And they found out that your cortisol levels drop by around 12%, which is the stress hormone. And your natural killer cells increase by 50% doing that too, which are like the immune system warriors. And so because of like the direct influence on stress that has on your immune system, and we have the data around that now, is freaking incredible, dude. So yeah, you're exactly right.
I went off on a bit of a tangent, but going back to the point I made earlier. So the defense for people who say that Western medicine is the exact way to do things is antibiotics, penicillin. What else? Is it surgery? What else is in their defense?
Yeah, I think that it's mostly, I would say the life expectancy argument is what most people say, but I'm sure you've heard the term like lifespan versus health span. And it's like we're living longer than ever, but we're also dying longer than ever. And we're just keeping people alive. But the craziest thing about that argument is it's not even true anymore, because for the first time ever in literally human history, life expectancy is on the decline. Like and for the first time ever, we are eating ourselves to death instead of starving to death. Like that's always been the problem historically with humans, is that like a scarcity, right? And now we are in excess and we are in consumerism and we are eating too much. And there was a really cool study from the Lancet Journal that literally proved that food is the #1 killer on earth. Like that's what's leading to all heart disease, because it's heart disease, right? But how do you get heart disease? Through eating the wrong foods, through stress, things like that. But
so yeah, it's tricky for me because like that stuff's true, but why is that enough to discredit the validity and beauty and healing modalities of Eastern medicine and various components? Like why, even though that's true, like why is that enough to say like this stuff's all wrong? Like that just doesn't make sense to me. People argue that like because that stuff is true, this means that all the other stuff is completely wrong. It's complete binary thinking that I can't fall into. Even on the other side, like I do think there's definitely like you said, there's my own bias is like often like there's no way I can ever gain anything from anything doctor says. I haven't gone to the doctor in fucking forever because of that exact feeling, and that could be not great. So there has to be some kind of balancing middle ground in this new era we find ourselves in.
Yeah, I mean it goes so deep too. It's like so hard to just like, you can't just blame it on food, and you can't just blame Western medicine for everything that we've caused and why we're so sick. Like it goes so deep. And there's a saying in traditional Chinese medicine that they said an organism that an organism that destroys its environment destroys itself. And like talking about oneness and how we are all connected and we are nature and we are earth. And it's, the ancient concept of Taoism. And I think it's so profound when it comes to thinking about that of our health, because we have absolutely destroyed the earth as humans. Like we have sprayed over 6 billion pounds of pesticides on our food supply globally every single year. And it's not just affecting our food supply, it's affecting the soil, which then the soil is the lifeline for the food. And that's how it gives its nutrients. So that's why like we're eating, 70% less nutrient rich food than we were 50 years ago. And so it's like so deep, like we're directly influencing the earth, which is then directly influencing us because again, we tried to outsmart the divine. And the only reason why we use pesticides and herbicides and all of this shit is to try and get like a higher crop yield and try to get more food. But then we fucked with Mother Nature, and then therefore an organism that destroys its environment destroys itself. And we've polluted our oceans and rivers with plastics, and we drink.
That's what drives me crazy about the kind of new global warming movement that you have people like Bill Gates, advocating for like, this is going to kill us all. But these people are the ones fucking spraying pesticides and glyphosate all over the place.
Yeah,
it's
they
like,
don't get it.
They're destroying the soil and being like, but that has no impact on the climate. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? You're destroying the soil and then the nutrients that come out of it and the carbon that's eventually sequestered by it. It's like, what the fuck are these people talking about? That's why I can't trust them. I have all these, people screaming about climate change and have no idea about the soil. I'm like, what? Like, doesn't make any sense to me. It's just so many contradictions. One point I wanted to hit is because of the way I eat, what I often confront is people, because I eat a lot of steak, butter, eggs, like it's most of my food. And they're like, you're going to have a heart attack. You're going to die from cholesterol. And I'm like, you are in the Matrix. But what's your answer to that? Because I haven't dived into the science deep enough to have like a legitimate response.
Yeah.
I just want to feel like, I know how my brain feels when I eat butter, steak, eggs. Like my brain feels so alive. When I don't eat that stuff and I eat more like lower fat chicken breast, I feel like shit. Like my brain just isn't like, it's not firing the same way. So what's your answer to that?
Yeah, I'm not an absolute expert on this, but I can give some thoughts to it. So basically the way that we have measured heart disease for the longest time was basically your LDL to HDL ratio. And so by eating high fat foods like that, yes, you will raise your LDL cholesterol levels. And that has been considered and coined a term of bad cholesterol. And essentially, man, again, like this goes so deep. There was a guy, his name was Ansel Keys, and he was a huge proponent. He basically created the statin industry that then, statins lower cholesterol. And so normal cholesterol levels, over the past 100 years have just become lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. And now it's like, I can't remember how many millions of Americans are prescribed statins every year. So like those two really go hand in hand.
The metric has gone down.
Yeah, exactly. And so the metric keeps going down.
What's high cholesterol now was not high cholesterol a while ago.
I think it's right around 200 LDL or something. And like, dude, yeah, mine. So like a lot of people, like, I don't know, have you gotten yours tested?
I don't go to the doctor.
Yeah, it's true. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, mine was considered high. I know that. And it was like around like, 200 or something like that. And
mine's definitely fucking high as shit.
Yeah. There's people that get up to like, I think like Paul Saladino, was like showing levels of like 400 or 600 or even something else like crazy off the charts. But he's not worried about it because basically there's science now that basically says that LDL is a poor marker of, it's just a marker of cholesterol, but it's not a marker of heart disease. And really what we should be looking at is the lipid particle size. And so HDL and LDL are just, they're lipids. But what we need to be measuring is the particle size. And so there's another test called like LP(a) that people are testing. And it's basically like how big or small is the particle size, because that's what's actually going to lead to the artery clogging and leading to heart disease. And so, I'm not a doctor. I can't speak to like a super high level, but that's my understanding of that. The argument that LDL actually causes heart disease has kind of been thrown out the window. And we've realized, and probably why you feel so much better, is like you need cholesterol in your body because like that's what your brain is made of. Your brain is made of cholesterol. So that's probably why you say like when you eat those more high fat foods.
Doesn't the testosterone get created from cholesterol?
Exactly. And your vitamin D, like vitamin D in the body. That's why they say vitamin D acts kind of more like a hormone than an actual vitamin. Because it's the only vitamin that your body produces on its own. Like sunlight hits the skin and your body converts it, and it needs cholesterol to do and use that process. And so by like constantly just like, taking statins and lowering the cholesterol more and more and more and more, your body is just not going to be
also
able to
like
do its thing.
where has that solution gotten us? Has it helped?
No, that's the other thing too, is like statins probably don't really prevent heart disease as much as we thought, because again, we're only looking at cholesterol. Like we're tracking just like one little marker instead of viewing us as a true holistic being.
Mhm.
It again goes back to the mechanic versus the gardener.
Another couple points I'm also asking a lot of this for myself, because I want to know, like, I'm feeling justified in my own, because again, your point was so beautiful earlier. It's like, I do not listen to science. You can call me fucking crazy. I just listen to how I feel. I've tried every food, everything, and how I feel eating mostly steak, eggs, butter, fruit. I feel way better. So that's been my scientific experiment. It's like, what makes me feel the most alive and consciously present and vibrant? I don't give a fuck what you say. If I feel this way, I know I'm right. But why I feel good now is that you're saying everything that my own body's been telling me, which is awesome. And I think people have actually, they did this, their bodies would tell them that. Like anyone who's shifted more towards, we'll get into what you believe is the best diet, but like what is mostly like any way of eating mostly whole foods, they feel better. They feel less depressed. They feel better. Like their body's telling them, hey, this is the way, and science is differently. So it's such a beautiful point. But again, okay, so next topic I wanted to hit was sweeteners. So specifically, what are the consequences of eating aspartame? Like what are good sweeteners, what are bad sweeteners, essentially? Because again, people will, in the fitness community, will be like, there's no evidence that aspartame or sucralose are bad for you. I'm like, dude, when I eat aspartame or sucralose, I literally have an asthma attack. One.
Whoa.
And I immediately have my gut just feels horrible. So it's like, how? I'm just confused with that point. Like, I don't get how they can justify how aspartame and these things are good for you. If I eat something different, it feels way different. So, sorry to digress, but what's your take on sweeteners?
Dude, it's the same exact thing. Like they are measuring the endpoint of the study, like of like good for you is, does it cause weight gain or weight loss? That's the only thing that they're measuring in like all of the research. And so again, it's like, that's why the fitness people are the ones talking about
There's
it.
no study that studies the microbiome from the sweeteners.
There are.
Okay.
There are those that do show that they disrupt the gut microbiome. And so that's why like the people in more like the health and holistic health space point to that, because we're tracking a health metric of the gut and the microbiome, and they're tracking a health metric of weight loss and weight gain. And so that's why like they're arguing like, aspartame is not, unhealthy, and it's actually healthy. Like they'll say it's actually healthy for you because drinking Diet Coke makes you lose more weight than drinking regular Coke or something like that, And so they're viewing weight loss as the health metric, but not all the other stuff. And there was also like a really fascinating meta-analysis done, which is basically they take all the studies out there that have been done on artificial sweeteners and then do an analysis of all the research that's been done. And I think 90% of the research that showed that artificial sweeteners were not harmful were directly funded by the food industry. And so that's the other thing that we have to look to.
How does that work? How does that work? Like, because I hear it and I'm like, how the fuck can that happen? Like, I'd love for you to go into the mechanics of like how, okay, for example, if I was fucking Diet Coke and I was like, I want to make people know that aspartame is not bad for you so I can keep putting it in the Diet Coke. How can I go about funding studies that prove that? Like, how does that work? How does a company that wants to defend itself and increase profits manipulate the scientific industry to create studies that defend its own ingredients?
So this one goes pretty deep, and it all points to the FDA, because the FDA is who regulates the food companies and the drug companies. And essentially the FDA got super overrun because they couldn't keep up with the times. Like so many food companies, launched, and so many medical device companies launched, and so many pharmaceutical companies, and they couldn't regulate all of them. So the FDA gave power to these companies to do that. And so then the FDA just has to look at the study and say, yeah, sure. Like the study was done well. It was done under these metrics. It was done, the right way. It has a hypothesis and a conclusion and all of that shit. And so like the FDA isn't actually really regulating the very companies that they're supposed to be regulating. And I'll give you an example. I actually used to work in the medical device industry. I was a sales rep for a med device company, which is crazy. But There's this unique process in the medical device industry, which is directly regulated, quote unquote, from the FDA. And it's called an HDE process, or a 510K clearance. And essentially what it means is if there is a device out there that does a similar thing and you're in a similar category, you can just go to the FDA and say that we're going to file a 510K clearance for this device. And then you just point to the device that it's like similar to. So for example, I was in spine surgery, and what we would do is like take out the disc for people, like the disc in between the vertebrae of the spine. And you would put in something called a cage in between to like replace the disc that basically just keeps the height of the disc space. And there became all of these like really interesting technology that were called expandable cages. So you could put the cage in, and then you would use this little screwdriver to like jack up your spine and like keep the height on it. And like one company launched a expandable cage, and then all of a sudden they're like, that's a cool technology, and doctors started using it. And then within a year, the market is flooded with 20 new expandable cages, but the only one that actually ever had to do human trial research is the first one. All the 19 companies that came after that just had to file for a 510K clearance because the FDA can't they don't have basically manpower to regulate all of that. And so there's tons of devices that have never actually been studied in human use, and they get out of it through this loophole called the 510K clearance process.
So wait. So they can just create, in that example, they can create a new device and add something to it. Like they can add a new component to it and has no need to be studied. And they can just throw it in a human body.
Yeah, as long as it has like some level of animal study, they can basically surpass the 510K clearance because the FDA
Jesus
doesn't have the right. It's a disaster,
What the
dude.
fuck?
Yeah, and it's the same thing with like why like the FDA essentially gave power to the food companies, to the device companies, and to the pharmaceutical companies to do their own research and basically just say like, yeah, we trust you guys. You can, just do all of your
So
own
now
research.
I'm adding the dots. So correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to understand it, and I think in my process of trying to understand it, the listeners can understand it too. So if maybe I don't understand it. So okay, let's use let's say this new diet soda comes out, and it wants FDA clearance, and it'll basically just present some self-funded study
Correct.
to pass that 5 to 10K thing to allow it to be consumed by people.
That's how it works in
So
the
like
medical
if Diet
device
Coke
industry.
did it and they have that thing, then this diet soda can have it because we did this self-funded study.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep. It
What
just has
the
to be
fuck, bro?
self-funded.
What the
Yeah.
hell?
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, that's what I'm
So
saying.
they're self-funding their own studies to justify their own FDA approval.
100%.
What the fuck?
I know.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
How the hell is that even possible?
Well, I mean, that's where it goes deeper. And like, if you look into what percentage of the FDA is funded directly by the food industry, by the pharmaceutical companies, I think it's basically, it was hilarious because RFK sent out a tweet or something that basically said the FDA, or he was quoted on like a news show saying the FDA is 50% funded directly by the pharmaceutical and medical companies, the very companies that they are supposed to be regulating. 50% of the FDA's budget comes from those companies. And the FDA came back on a news show, and it was like a speaker for the FDA that was representing the FDA. And he was like, that's not true at all. RFK is a liar. It's 48%. And so they just blatantly admitted it that like, yeah, that he was spreading misinformation. It's actually only 48%.
Yeah, there's also that New York Times piece where they were fact-checking Robert Kennedy's perception of the ingredient differentials in cereals, and they were like, he's lying. The only difference is that we use Red 40 and all these things.
I saw that, bro.
what
It
the fuck?
cracked me up. Yeah.
I did not know that. That's insane. Fucking hell. Yeah. Well, so back to again, I digressed. That sweeteners. So, what's the impact of eating shitty sweeteners? What are the shitty sweeteners? What are better alternatives? Like if you have a sweet tooth, you want to, have things like that. What should you use instead?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we definitely have some research that shows obviously that the artificial sweeteners are harmful. But dude, again, like I always ask people, like, what a joke that you're arguing artificial sweeteners are good for you. Like, just listen to it. The word artificial is in it. Like, we literally call them artificial, which means fake sweeteners. I am a real human, a real body. Like, I'm not going to put something that literally says fake.
You're defending
in the
fake
title.
food.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like just the whole concept of it is crazy. But we do have some research specifically for sucralose that it causes blood cancers in rats. So like it's rat studies, and all the, people will be like, oh, it's rat studies, it doesn't matter, but
I mean, if
it's
it's
harmful.
killing fucking rats, then I mean, fair enough.
We should at least acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be acknowledged. But again, I'm not I try to stay up to date on the research, but I never I don't like lean on science as a religion. You know what I mean? Like I acknowledge it, but I do what I will with it. But yeah, I would say like the biggest ones that we have research on that's showing is the aspartame and sucralose are probably the ones that I would really stay away from, which sucralose is Splenda. And those are the ones that, basically disrupt the gut microbiome, cause certain cancers in rat studies, things like that. But honestly, I feel like there's a bigger issue at hand where, again, it goes back to this like post-ingestive feedback loop where it's really like the sweetness of something is the issue. So for example, sucralose is 400 times sweeter than table sugar, and it doesn't contain any calories. And again, going back to flavors is what signals your brain of nutrients in that post-ingestive feedback loop. Of course, it's just going to like confuse the hell out of your body when you're eating something that's insanely sweet, but that doesn't have any caloric value to it or any nutrients associated with it. So I would almost have people rather eat just like table sugar than eat, or cane sugar, than eat most artificial sweeteners.
So I think using that point, can't the same be said for stevia or monk fruit? Like what
for sure.
I consume those, but I don't feel as bad. So like what's the difference there?
I think the same argument can be made there. And like we use organic monk fruit in our products. But again, like that's a real whole food. And so it's a little bit different in that regards, where like stevia is a leaf. It comes from nature. Monk fruit is it's called lu hongao. And the reason why they call it monk fruit is because Buddhist monks used to use it as medicine to help treat their coughs. So you know how we do the same thing with honey? Like they did that with monk fruit. So like I look at that and I'm like, yeah, it's at least a real food. And it's not like that same level of like 400 times sweeter than sugar. It's like, still like 50 to 100 times sweeter than sugar. But it's also coming from a real whole food. And for sure, like we're concentrating it and stuff. But that's why I'm so mindful, like when we create the Kono products, and you probably noticed this, like they're not sweet. They're more like tart and bitter, because I know the power of that post-ingestive feedback loop. And so we're using like the tiniest little amounts that we possibly can, because I know the power in flavors being associated with nutrients. And I recently went on a different podcast with a functional medicine provider, and she was talking about people that are like type 2 diabetic. And even when she has a continuous glucose monitor on them, that when they are consuming like high levels of like really sweet stevia products, she'll see a little blood sugar spike on them, even though like everyone says that, it shouldn't spike blood sugar. I think that that's how powerful our mind is because like we consume something sweet, your brain kind of thinks that you're getting something sweet, and it's going to mimic the natural process that should happen in the body when you do consume something sweet. Yeah. But I'm fine with stevia and monk fruit in small amounts, as long as it's not like you're using it again as this like,
So if your stevia product tastes like candy, probably not great.
Exactly.
So if you're having the electrolyte powders that taste like candy, or if you're having, those like dark chocolate stevia things that taste super sweet, maybe an issue.
It possibly, like again, like I don't like,
but at least
research.
Bare minimum, it's better than the alternative of aspartame and
absolutely
sucralose.
It appears to be. Yeah, it appears to be. Absolutely. Yeah, because again, those are real foods. Like sucralose, all that other stuff, like it's completely just like, manufactured in a lab. Like stevia, you're taking a leaf, grinding it into a powder.
Like my own experience, like I do consume stevia, full honesty. My stomach doesn't feel like it's getting destroyed when I have it. When I do have aspartame and sucralose, my gut feels like it's getting ripped. So that's the only thing I notice in myself.
Yeah.
But I also fast all day, so I kind of maybe I don't get the same negative effects. I don't know. Okay, next on my list, what's your take on gluten?
Yeah, this is a fascinating topic, just because people can go consume gluten in most other countries and feel completely fine, right? And we consume gluten here, and pretty much everyone gets destroyed by it now. Yeah. So basically what happened, I can't remember the exact year, early 2000s, I believe, is that we gave agricultural companies the ability to directly spray glyphosate on the crops. And the 3 crops that they are sprayed directly upon are wheat, corn, and soy.
First of all, why do they spray glyphosate? What does it do?
So glyphosate is Roundup, which is a weed killer. So that's why there was no reason to ever spray it directly on the food supply. So how we should use it, we shouldn't even use it at all, but how they used to use it is they would just go and directly spray the weeds around the crops because it would kill the weeds. But obviously that's still an issue because it's getting into the soil and the whole farm. But now they were just like, fuck it. Let's spray it all over directly on the
America,
crops.
baby, let's go.
Yeah. And so I think it was like 2011, maybe 2009, 2011 when that happened and they passed that ability to do that. And so then they had to make specific crops that were glyphosate resistant. So they genetically modified, the wheat, the corn, and the soy to be glyphosate resistant because glyphosate is so powerful. It kills everything that it comes into contact with. So they had to, genetically modify wheat, corn, and soy to be glyphosate resistant crops. And so the wheat we're consuming is totally, totally different wheat than majority of the world. And so that's really the big issue with gluten is a lot of people think that it's probably just like glyphosate poisoning and not actually the gluten. Like that's why, I don't know if you've been to like Italy or ate pasta over there or anything like that. But
no matter what it is, I just don't think gluten is good for me.
Yeah.
I'm not saying for anyone, just I haven't tried it over there, but when I eat it here, I literally feel like I'm dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not exaggerating. If I eat a sandwich in America, I literally feel like I'm dying.
Yeah.
So
I think that could partially be due to some of your overgrowths too.
Yeah.
Because like that's where, that can go a little bit deeper as well. But like, so many people have so many food intolerances because they have inflammation in their gut from taking so many antibiotics like you and I did for so long that then led to overgrowths and other issues in the gut. And that's probably why you feel incredible, like eating just like really simple foods, So there's definitely levels to it. I'm with you. Like I think that gluten should be cut out from the American diet completely just because of what we've done to it. But like if I'm over in Italy, dude, like I'm gonna go eat some pasta and get to explore. Cultures.
Is there like a minimal harm? Like if you're gonna eat gluten here, is there a way you can minimize the harm? There's no way. Like, there's no product. There's no like. Some people say sourdough. Some people say like if you buy Ezekiel bread, like is there any way? Like, or do you just think no go?
I think
no
if you make it like some fresh sourdough can be pretty good. And just the way that it works is it basically pre-digests the gluten. And so, because it goes through that fermentation process, and the fermentation is basically the bacteria like eating things. And so it eats up a lot of the gluten. And so it's really, really low and minimal in gluten. And it also kind of pre-digests it for you because it comes with some bacteria and enzymes that help the digestive process. So yeah, I eat sourdough every once in a while, but like Ezekiel bread wrecks me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so fascinating because the main carb source for most Americans is gluten, is bread, pasta. Fuck.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That just fucked. Okay. In terms of diet, what is the best diet in your eyes? There's so many fads. Carnivore, animal-based, keto, paleo. In your eyes, what is the optimal way to eat? Is there one? At the bare minimum, what should we do? What's your take here?
Yep. I try to simplify it as much as I possibly can. And like the easiest first step for most people that are eating just, processed foods, should eat real foods, single ingredient foods where you don't even have to look at an ingredient label, and so then a level beyond that would be the sourcing, because I think that genuinely matters. So only organic, only grass-fed, only pasture-raised. And so, for example, like my diet is I try to focus on that 0.6 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And so I make that the priority. I eat only grass-fed meat or pasture-raised chicken. And I'm with you, like I don't eat much chicken anymore because that is a dark industry too. Like most of the chicken in the US, they bathe it in basically chlorine to clean it off before they package it and put it in there. So there's just like a lot of...
And the chicken just like stuck in a coop, tiny
exactly.
coop, and it's not moving ever.
That's why they have to do it, is because it's such a dirty animal and it's such a dirty living environment that's like legit nasty. So that's why they have to like clean it. They use cleaning agents to like clean the meat before they package it because it's grown in such a awful environment. So I rarely do that. I eat some, fish and turkey every once in a while, but wild caught fish or pasture raised
I
turkey.
eat wild caught
Yep.
salmon.
Yep. And then beyond that, I eat organic fruits and vegetables. I eat organic white rice because it's a lot easier to digest. Like if you look at any other cultures that consume a lot of white rice as a staple carbohydrate, they remove the husk from it, which
Yeah.
is brown rice, because it makes it a lot easier to
That's
digest.
one of the things that's so dumb for me is people who think brown rice is healthier. Just
Yeah.
just your gut feels way more inflamed when you eat brown rice.
Yeah, 100%, because it still has that like hard husk on the
Yeah.
outside. That's the only difference, is it's just removed. So I do that and a little bit of like potatoes here and there. I actually wrote a book that's called Eat Your Medicine, and it's available on Amazon. So if you just go type in Eat Your Medicine by Alex Conley, or Alex D. Conley, I believe I had to put the middle initial in my author name on Amazon. But I basically gave an intro to people as food is medicine and how powerful people can be, because I think the disconnect with like, I can sit here and tell people what to eat, but they're like, why? Like, why should I be eating those foods? And what does it do for me? And I feel like people have never been taught like why we should be eating foods. So what I did is I basically made like a guide to grocery shopping and just listed out pretty much every single ingredient food that exists on earth. Because I'm like, if it's a single ingredient food, in my opinion, it's pretty fair game.
Yeah. So what you're arguing is that at least just cut out processed foods.
100%. That's the biggest
that's
thing.
it.
And I do think the sourcing matters the most,
Mhm.
and hitting some protein and healthy fats matters the most. And like, of course, like the macros matter a little bit. Like I wouldn't recommend someone just eating like organic white rice all day as a staple. You know what I mean? Like, so of course the calories matter a little bit, and of course the macros matter a little bit. But I think what really matters most is the high quality sourcing and the compounds that you're getting in foods. And so that's really what I did in the book, is basically list out like, you know, blueberries contain anthocyanins that does this, this, and this for the body. And, you know, pomegranates have a really cool compound called punic acid that helps heart health.
Mhm.
And, you know, so like all these different unique benefits. That way, when you walk into a grocery store, you're not just viewing it as like, yeah, I'm going to get some meat, fruit, and veggies. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go get a pomegranate because I read this cool thing about this compound that it has in it that really, you know, helps my heart. And so then you start like realizing that eating healthy is so much more fun, and you understand why it's fueling every single, you know, cell in your body.
What's your take on vegetarian, vegan?
I think that when you view food as medicine, you're missing far too much medicine. Like there's beautiful, beautiful compounds in meat. Creatine, for example, is one of them that there's only basically 2 substances on planet Earth that are known to offset a poor night of sleep, and it's caffeine and creatine. Like that's how important critical creatine is for our brain health. And so I think that by not consuming,
Can you not get it
meat,
in a supplement?
you could.
Not the same though.
I
it the
just am
same?
such a fan, dude. Like I own a supplement company, and
Yeah.
I'm like, why? Like God didn't intend us to live on supplements.
Yeah.
He intended us to live on food. A supplement should be in addition to, you know what I mean? So like, I think that the concept of like relying on supplements for your food source is a bad idea. I think that like a supplement should be what it should
That's
be.
true. That's the often thing I think about with vegetarians and vegans, is that like I can't argue the moral argument. I can't. Like that's a separate issue. It's a hard thing to be like, you're wrong about that. That's a hard one in my heart, honestly. I reckon with it a lot.
Same.
Personally.
Yeah.
However, like the fact that they need protein powders, creatine powders, all these like supplements to be healthy as a vegetarian is what finalizes it for me. It's like your point, like you need supplementation that goes against nature to basically survive.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever seen like any of those shows like Alive or like Going and Living Out, and
No.
where it's basically like they'll send someone out in the wilderness for like, you know, or like 20 people, and they all compete against each other to see how long they can live out there.
Is it good? It's entertaining?
It's so entertaining, but like 99% of plants on planet Earth are like poisonous, you know? And so like it would be impossible 100 years ago to survive off of a vegan or vegetarian diet. Literally impossible. You couldn't do it in the wild, you know? And so it's like, I do think that we are intended to eat meat. But I also I think that we're intended to eat vegetables. Like, I think that the argument that vegetables are toxic, and like this is why it's so confusing, is because the argument is actually correct to a certain
I don't
point,
eat
right?
vegetables. Full honesty.
Right. I knew that.
I don't. I don't know shit. I'm just again. I'll say in this podcast, I don't know absolute shit. All I know is what I feel, and when I felt eating vegetables, I was more inflamed. I had more bloating. Personally,
Yeah.
it's not to say they're bad for you. Just for me, maybe now that I can try them again, but they just when I eat a salad, I wouldn't feel good. I just wouldn't
Yeah.
feel good at all.
It's because of the overgrowths. I know that because like there's really, really strong prebiotic fibers, which is what feeds bacteria. And so when you consume prebiotic fibers, it's feeding that bacteria. And when you have an overgrowth of bacteria like SIBO, basically what happens is you get a flare up and you get a little bit inflamed.
Yeah.
And
Once I clear this stuff, which I'm in the process of doing it now, I'm sure it'll be a different experience.
it will be. Yeah. But I think like the argument that vegetables are toxic, like it is actually true and it is correct. Like there are defense chemicals in plants, and plants are living beings that do try to defend themselves. Like for example, when you cut into an onion and it makes you cry, like that's the defense, you know?
That's
like
crazy. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it's such a strong defense. It gives off, and it only happens when it breaks the cell wall of the onion. Like that's the intelligent wisdom of the living being of an onion. You know
It's
what
like
I
a
mean?
skunk.
Dude, it's crazy. Yeah, exactly. And so what happens is it gives off sulfuric acid, and it only releases sulfuric acid when it touches your tear ducts. And so it needs that in order to like make you cry. Like that's its defense. But then onions also contain like quercetin, which is one of the most powerful antioxidants in the world.
Yeah.
And there's this, I don't know if you've heard of the concept hormesis. And hormesis is essentially what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so like cold plunging and sauna would be considered environmental hormesis, or exercise is considered, hormesis. And hormesis is essentially you're putting a small amount of stress on your body intentionally. And then that causes your body to adapt and overcome and get stronger. Because exercise in the short term, you would look at it like what it does to your body, and you'd be like, oh my God, my heart rate was through the roof and I'm really sore and I tore all my muscles. Like if you looked at it from that way, you'd be like, exercise is bad for you. But then what happens is you tear yourself down and then bring yourself back up a little bit higher. That's kind of how I view vegetables, is like it's another form of hormesis, of almost like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
I buy it, but I'm going to just bring this counter argument. There's a football player, Ocho Cinco, who only eats McDonald's. When he's asked, why do you only eat McDonald's, he brings the argument up. He says that,
Does he really?
The same exact argument. He says that like, because it's like a little poison, I have to like overcome that and it strengthens my body. So like, what's different between your argument and something like that?
Yeah, that's tricky, dude. It's hilarious. I mean, I would just say it's grown by God. Like that's where I just lean on like we were, in my opinion, like God gave us that for a reason to use that. And God didn't give us McDonald's.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. Okay, so I want to move to a bit of a kind of spiritual conversation, get a little out there. I mean, I do that, but I just think it's an interesting conversation. So I haven't discussed all this today. We can obviously see there's a seriously nefarious agenda at play, specifically with the things that come to mind. What you've discussed is the FDA whole thing, which is insane. So the common response I'll hear from people who want to just explain it as a human thing is that, we live in a capitalist world. And in a capitalist world, you have to maximize profits. And to maximize profits, you have to basically accept that you're going to sacrifice certain healthy things. And, if Driscoll wants to make more berries that taste better, they're going to put pesticides. If McDonald's wants to make more food that's affordable, they're going to use shitty ingredients, right? And that makes this capitalist country be what it is. That's one answer. Then I'm like, okay, I am a spiritual person. I do believe there's evil at play. Like, if you look at the amount of fucking like death and disease and destruction in the hospitals and the system from this, I've been in that. I've seen my mom die from this stuff. Like, I've experienced it myself. Like, I truly, when I walk into a hospital, I feel intuitively just like evil, and it's a hard thing to sit with. It's like, it's a tricky thing to discuss. Like, is it just human greed and incompetence, or is there some spiritual shenanigans going on? And I'm curious to hear, because you're someone, a lot of people who do this stuff, who talk about science and health, they kind of ignore the divine aspect of things, the spiritual aspect of things. I'm curious about your perspective. Like, what do you feel is going on here? Do you feel like there's a genuine like evil permeating this structure, or do you think it's just a consequence of capitalism, or a combination of both?
I think a combination of both. Absolutely. I think that what has happened and where the spiritual disconnection is in Western medicine is all rooted in the fear of death.
Mm.
And I think that that's really like the root of the consciousness issue here, and why we created Western medicine, and why you see like biohacking taking off, and why you see people getting Botox and lip injections and fillers, is we have this like desire to look younger and live longer and all of this stuff. And that's why like all of that was
beat God,
exactly,
yeah.
it all goes back to that. And so that's where I think like the consciousness that we have created Western medicine is all rooted in like our fear of death. And so I do think it's like the root of everything that we've created and all of the capitalism is that we are all really afraid to die, which is then really just the same thing as being afraid to live. And yeah, I had a really interesting conversation with Samson about this yesterday, actually. And in my opinion, I think that that's just like we created it as a society here because we are so afraid to die. And like what do we do with like all of our elders here? Like we throw them in nursing homes. Like
we don't even want to look at them because their image reminds us of death.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Yep. And that's why I think we have just like created all of this. And that's why I'm almost like, I've been really hesitant in the biohacking space, you know? And that's why like all of our products at Kono and stuff like that, like I just look to...
But what do you consider biohacking?
Like using red light therapy and using, you know, like all these different like grounding mats and pads and like all of this stuff, when in reality, like we're just, again, we're kind of like almost mimicking nature through technology. And so red light is just like, you can get red light early in the day from the morning sunlight, right? Like we are mimicking those infrared waves and those wavelengths of light. And so it's like, we're creating all of this technology to help us like not die and live
the biohacking
longer.
Fucked me because when I was super into biohacking, I was, how do I explain it? It was helping me overcome the things I wasn't getting in my habits, my food and health habits. Like I wasn't getting morning sun, I wasn't eating things correctly, and I felt kind of like shit. But because of biohacking, I didn't address the issues. I was, oh, if I get in the red light, if I get my ice bath, if I do all these things, grounding mat, the breath work, I feel good, right? But you shouldn't need those things to feel good. Like I needed the ice bath, I needed these things to actually feel good.
Yeah.
And there's certain arguments I actually do believe. Like when I get hard on myself, like I need to go to the gym. As a person, like I have to work out most days, and I think that there's a human necessity. That's
For
like
sure.
my own
It's just
bias.
movement.
Like,
Yeah.
you have to work out to be happy. I'm like, yeah, I do. I do have to go to the fucking gym and move my body to
Well,
feel.
we're meant to move, like, you know,
to feel good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the. Okay, so biohacking. I cut you off, but so you're saying how biohacking is reflective of this collective fear of death, and that manifests what we're dealing with now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I do think, and I don't even know if that answered your question.
But as a part of it, like what's causing it, I meant more so like a spiritual component. Do you believe there's genuine evil shenanigans occurring in the system, or do you believe it's just like that own manifestation of things, of just being a fear of death, right? 'Cause for me, it's like, how could you invent something not more evil? Like it just like you're not only you're killing everyone, but you're killing everyone while convincing them that they're being healthy.
I think
Like
that
that's like the most sinister thing I can imagine. It's like is using this veil of false light through science. You know, we're saving you, we're helping you, and then fucking killing you.
Yeah.
To profit off you. Just like I couldn't think of anything more evil.
I think that it didn't start as evil, but the money is so good that there's no choice but to just like ignore the evil kind of thing. And so I think that just even, for example, going back to like where Western medicine started, or the whole like Rockefeller family and things like that, I do think that maybe they were like, I mean, for sure they saw the capitalism aspect of it and they were like, holy shit, we could probably make a lot of money off this and changing the medical system. But I think that maybe there was a part of them that thought like, this is actually really cool. This is technology. We're advancing as a species and stuff like that. But then actually what ended up happening was we saw cancer rates start to skyrocket like in those next like 30 years. And I don't know if you knew this, but then like the American Cancer Society was actually started by them too. And so then I think that maybe that's where like the evil comes into play, is like they probably directly knew that they were causing cancer by this intervention first model and this pharmaceutical model that was changing people's physiology and all of a sudden causing cells to isolate and then turn into cancer cells and create cancer in the body. And they were like, okay, we're going to create the American Cancer Society to kind of like offset maybe what we have caused. And so I go back and forth, dude. This is like such a struggle for me because I think about it all the time where I'm like, I want to believe so badly that it's like not directly intended evil. And even with like Bill Gates, for example, I'm like, maybe he's just super uninformed and not like a direct evil force. Like, I almost feel like he's just like convinced himself that he's doing something good. Like, because
But that's
you
still
can,
evil, though.
that's true.
It's still evil.
That's true.
It's different because he's not like consciously doing evil, but it's still evil, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is in a way. It is in a way. And like I said, I think that like where it really started was the money. And I guess like maybe that's the, the
I
classic
think that the
saying.
root, if we could identify a root cause of this, it's people prioritizing profits in the face of other people's health and demise. And I think all of us can relate to that, right? Like I'm assuming everyone, human being, has done something for money that they wouldn't have done if it wasn't for money. Um, you know, I recently was doing something just for money, and it came at the cost of my own soul.
Which you're right. I mean, that's evil.
So
Yeah.
just like that,
Yeah.
maybe that requires more reflection in each person. Like, am I doing this just for profit, or am I doing this to help people? But to close this all off, so people that have something to really hone it on and take in is that, okay, if you were like, not many people can be as disciplined as us. Not saying that with like superiority, it's just a fact. Like, it's hard. Like, me fasting every day, I'm good at this stuff because I was a drug addict. So what it took to overcome that, this is easy in comparison to my life, right? Fasting all day, eating healthy, not fucking eating fried food and processed sugars. Like, it's not hard for me because I overcame drug addiction. Like, this is actually pretty easy because of that. Most people don't have that, like, that reference point. So for people who are just doing what they can, right? What's like the absolute no-nos? Like, do not fucking do that. And what can they play with? Like, what within the mainstream food culture, drink, whatever culture, can they kind of get away with? You get what I'm saying? Like, what's like the absolute essential no-nos, and what's like something that's like, okay, that's probably fine. It's not going to kill you.
For sure. Well, I think it's really tricky because when most people in the health space talk about how to get healthy, that's kind of the first place they go, is they give the list of like absolute no-goes, and they say like, you have to avoid all of these things. And people kind of get mind fucked because they're like, damn, I've been eating all of that stuff. And then they get super overwhelmed. And what happens when people get overwhelmed is they say, fuck it, I quit. Like, I'm just going to go back to it. Right. And so what I always encourage people to start with is basically that what the health space does is they have a subtraction model where they say you have to remove this, and from your diet. And when people feel like something is being like taken away from them, they usually fail, And so I always tell people to start with the addition instead of the subtraction. So I would recommend just like start with the addition of maybe focusing on a little bit more high quality protein. Start with the addition of maybe throwing in a little bit of organic fruits and vegetables, and by starting that, what you're actually doing is you're altering your gut microbiome, which is then developing the serotonin and the dopamine and the drive and the motivation, which then equates to discipline. And so I think that like starting with the addition of good foods will literally change the gut microbiome, which then literally changes the mind and how you think and how you feel. And then all of a sudden it becomes a little bit easier to get discipline. And this process can just like take time. But, to your point of like giving people some of the absolute no-goes, I mean, I personally think seed oils are up there. I personally think the artificial sweeteners are up there. Really just most forms of processed foods, And again, going back to like most processed foods are made from wheat, corn, and soy, which are the crops that are directly sprayed.
Cookies, all that shit.
Exactly. Yeah. And so like how to describe an ultra processed food is something that you couldn't even possibly identify where the food came from. So you turned corn into, frosted mini wheats or some, cereal, right? Like you have no idea that came from corn. You couldn't even figure out how to make it in your kitchen if you tried. Anything like that, avoid it. Absolutely. Like it's legitimately not food. Like we shouldn't even be calling it food, And that's why the only food, I'm like, if it's a single ingredient food, that's real food. So like game on, like just eat more of that. And then you begin to change your body from the inside out, which then starts to affect your frequency, because like, how can you possibly, like going back to like the chart of consciousness, it's like, how can you possibly live and love and enjoy and anything in a somewhat high frequency if you can't produce serotonin and dopamine in your gut? Like, you have no chance of even
Yeah.
Of doing that.
Yeah. What I will add here to bring it back to what I started this podcast with and kind of didn't focus on it at all, funnily enough, is that like when I feel like shit, people get the shitty version of me. If I'm not healthy, if I'm feeling like shit because of the food I ate, my partner, the woman I'm dating theoretically, or my friends get a worse version of me. They get a low frequency, angry, bored, non-friendly person. When I feel good, I'm healthy, I'm eating right, I'm not drinking that much at all, but I'm sober. I'm not giving those people a chance to experience the best version of myself. And that impacts my love life, my friendship life exponentially. Like when I can give people the best version of myself, I honestly think it's the biggest gift we can give the world is not going doing charity everywhere. It's like give the best version of you to the world. Like, and that the world deserves that. And you can only do that. Step one is your health, right? And the answer back I'll hear from people who think I'm crazy is that like, you probably have no social life. You probably can't do anything. I can't eat at most restaurants. I don't drink. I can't go to clubs. I don't do drugs. Sure. What I can tell you is that like my felt experience of life is so vibrant and so beautiful that I don't need that. Like, I don't give a fuck, right? And when I sacrifice that for that, I'm sacrificing my internal beauty for external validation. Like it does not equate. Like this is, I believe life is an inside out game. It just is. Like, the better you are on the inside, the more the outside reflects that, period. So like health number one. I think that's what's missing in a lot of this dating spiritual advice is that like master these psychological concepts, heal your trauma, integrate these modalities of networking and, do breath work. It's like, dude, like I did that shit before I got healthy. It was like I was fighting a fucking war. It was like, it was way hard. Now that I'm healthy, truly, it's so easy. Like it's not that hard. Like these things can happen naturally, but when you're just focusing on the logical pieces, you get fucking smashed. So that's like the closing argument I can offer is that, truly life is an inside out game. And when you're healthy, you're giving yourself the best odds at succeeding. And if you're not, fuck, I don't know.
Dude, you stated that like so perfectly. You probably noticed like the biggest smile on my face as you were saying that. Yeah, it's the number one thing. And my favorite quote of all time, because I know what it's like to not have my health, is that a healthy person has 1,000 wishes, but a sick person has only one.
Mm-hmm. Well, add to that is that people don't even know what health is. Like they say, they think healthy means I'm not ill.
Right.
That's not what healthy is. Healthy should mean feeling great.
In the mental, the physical, the spiritual.
But in America, we're just wired to think, oh, I'm not sick today. I'm not, I don't have a broken bone. I don't have my gut isn't, I have diarrhea everywhere. But in reality, it should be just like, I'm healthy. Like, I feel really, I'm healthy should mean I feel really good.
Yep.
Not, I'm not dying today. And, as someone who, I can say, when I was an addict, when I was depressed, when I was anxious all the time, when I was all over the place and I was suicidal and I hated life and I hated everyone, I was fucking miserable. It's like Cain and Abel. I was unhealthy. Period. When I got healthy, that kind of just went away.
Did the people in your life change due to that?
Oh yeah. Because again, going back to my own spirituality, I know we attract what we are.
Right.
Period.
That's why I asked.
So it's like when you start raising your frequency through healthy foods, you're less likely to take drugs, you're less likely to drink alcohol, and you're less likely to hang around people who do those same things. So it's like when you get healthy, it can feel isolating because your frequency is raising so much that you realize how little people are actually healthy. And that's also pricey to kind of pay in the pursuit of health, is being like, I have to kind of let go of some of the friends who reflected back my lower frequency that was based in poor health habits.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Dude, I'm actually so glad that you brought up the topic of frequency, and I know we can close up here, but I want to.
There's no rush here. We can go for a long time.
Yeah. I want to bring this point up, that food carries a frequency too, and I'll prove it to you. So you've probably heard of the classification called adaptogens. So like ashwagandha. I bet most people have heard of ashwagandha. And the reason why they're called adaptogens is because those plants and compounds adapted to their environment. So what it basically means is that they were grown or raised, that living being, that living plant, that living organism was raised in a harsh environment, and they had to adapt and overcome and therefore get stronger. And so when we consume those plants or animals that had to do that, it carries that higher vibrational frequency of like a strong, nourishing plant or food. And so then when you consume that, it actually helps your body adapt to stress easier. Like that's why ashwagandha is known, like everyone takes it as like the anti-stress thing, right? It's because of how it was grown and raised and what it had to overcome and adapt to. That's why they're called adaptogens. And so like the very food that we eat carries a frequency that then directly impacts our frequency.
Yeah, and if, most people are eating is, dead, tortured animals and food that has no nutritional value and just artificial flavorings like that, you're going to become those things.
Yeah. So beyond the science of like the omega 3 to 6 ratio of grass-fed, grain-fed beef, like there's a vibrational frequency to it as well.
No doubt. That's super interesting. Well, I mean, it's awesome talking to you because, again, I'll repeat my point. You're giving a more logical and knowledgeable perspective to what I've been feeling intuitively and what people have been fucking gaslighting me for so long. Like most people, I know my family included, is like, you're fucking insane. You're going to die. You're going to be unhealthy. I'm like, dude, I don't think so. It's cool meeting someone who not only speaks to this, but designs their products based on this stuff. And I can say fundamentally, I'm the most stickler when it comes to this stuff. I consume no supplement products that are like powder stuff. I haven't in years. And your stuff's only stuff I'll take, literally. So, and that's already changed my life. Like the pre-workout, bro. I'm a bit of a gym bro. Like my PRs have gotten better. Like I feel way more. Like most people when they work out, like I work out and I have a massive like spike. Like I get home, I literally feel like I was dying. I was like, whoa, I'm dead.
Yeah.
I get home, it's like I blast off. I'm like slowly coming down. Like it's just like I can still work after and feel fine. And I'm fasted. Like that's awesome. Like it's a pre-workout that doesn't make you crash, and you kind of stay present after that, which is wild. So,
bro, that's
just making that product it's changed my life already. So just thank you for that. Even just designing stuff like that. That like if you're taking traditional pre-workout, stop. Trust.
Yeah, actually, I'll speak to that for a minute of like why that happens, and why most people crash after the gym is because you are sending a massive cortisol spike when you're working out, right? Like your body is in the ultimate state of stress.
Especially if you're bodybuilding. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Which again, like is a good thing short term. Obviously you don't want to live that long term, but like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And when you take traditional pre-workouts on top of that are jacked full of caffeine and things that make you tingly and make you have heart palpitations, like you're already starting your workout off with a huge cortisol spike and then getting another huge cortisol spike from the workout. Your body has no choice but to just crash hard to like save yourself. And it's the yin and yang. And what we did with our pre-workout is we were so intentional about that and so intentional about the sourcing. And we were like, why in the hell are people creating products that hurt your health when going to work out is something that is probably the best thing you can do for your health? Yeah. And so what we did is there's this super cool type of tea that's called guayusa tea that we use in the pre-workout. And I don't know if we talked about this, but it's grown in a garden that's called the Ancient Chakra Gardens, and it's in the Amazon rainforest. And we source it directly from indigenous tribes in the upper Amazon. And the chakra gardens are basically, they only grow what they consider to be medicinal plants with unique properties of the foods that directly impact the chakras. And so guayusa tea is really mind expanding, like the crown chakra. And what they would do is they use it in ceremony to, boost creativity of the mind. And now it's super cool because we have clinical studies on guayusa tea that show that it's actually almost more of a nootropic and acts as more of a cognitive boost than it does on just like creating jitters within the body from the caffeine. And so it's really like beautiful that we were able to, get again, like validation on what people are feeling through research, which is really unique and cool. And then we also use balancing herbs on that, like rhodiola root, for example, is a powerful adaptogen that helps your body adapt to stress. And so you're kind of getting that synergistic effect of like an uplifting, but also not one that's going to make you crash. And so rhodiola really helps with like sustained energy. And so that's why you kind of don't get that crash, is you're actually supporting the adrenals and supporting the stress response from workout. And so that way you don't just like wreck your day from it.
I felt it. I was shocked when I had it. It was truly amazing. My workouts have gone way better. Truly, it gone better and I don't crash after, which is awesome. Like before I'd work out, come home, I literally would be incapacitated, like on my phone, just like doing bullshit. Now I'm like, oh shit, I have energy to actually work and do the things I want to do. So where can people find your stuff and connect with you if they want to?
Yeah.
Again, my stamp of approval. I don't approve anything when it comes to this stuff. This stuff has actually been life-changing. Honestly, I'm not lying.
Dude, I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. And that was when we first connected, that was like the first thing you told me. And I was like so grateful to hear that and pumped. So yeah, the website is kononutrition.com. It's KONO. And Instagram is just Kono Nutrition. And my personal Instagram is Alex D. Conley. And it's CONLEY. And then, yeah, the Eat Your Medicine book, if people are interested in that, it's just on Amazon. And yeah, that's really it, man. We got a wide variety of different fitness products that we're really intentional about our sourcing. And, you know, I've put my heart and soul into this stuff, and I hope people feel that.
Thank you, man. I appreciate everything you said today. And I bet a lot of people learned a lot. So thank you.
Thanks, bro.
I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to watch more content, please click this video right here and don't forget to subscribe right here. Thank you.